What is up, everyone? Welcome back. We're back. The Discovering Bob Dylan podcast is back. We swore we wouldn't do it, but yeah, it's about 2 months later since our last recording session. I think it's been 45 days since the last episode premiered. So it's been a little while. Things have happened. Um, we met in person. I think that's probably the number one thing that has happened in the last 45 days.
Yeah, guys, sorry you don't have content. Joe and I were actually daring to form a real human connection. Sorry about that.
Yes, Dylan and the Minx came to Pittsburgh. I, of course, went to the show. It was fantastic. It's nice. It's nice to see that you're not all talk. Sometimes I have my doubts. Are you really a great drummer? Are you really the session drummer in Nashville with adoring fans? The answer is yes, unequivocally.
Yeah. My One of my wife's really good friends, her and her husband are filmmakers, and I remember when we went down to Atlanta to watch the premiere of their first feature-length film. The whole drive down, I was like, "Look, I know like logically that they're good at what they do and that they're professional, but especially with creative endeavors and your friends, you get so used to this mindset of like, okay, I'm about to go watch this amateur do something that's not as good as the real thing that I'm used to. And so then when we watched the movie and it was a real movie that I would pay to go see in the theater, and I was like, oh wow, that's that's a cool feeling. I imagine that's the feeling that you had.
Exactly. Described it precisely. So that
Yeah.
that happened, and you know, belatedly, begrudgingly, we get back to what we're here for, and that is talking about the great Bob Dylan. We're getting close to the end. We're doing a double episode today. Uh, Two albums, four discs of material. Bob doesn't make it easy on us. No, sir. We're doing Fallen Angels from 2016 and Triplicate from 2017. Kind of a continuation of his, brief. I guess it was a longer obsession with Frank Sinatra and that type of standard, the swing and standard American music. He zeroed in on certain songs, mostly sung by Frank Sinatra. We covered Shadows in the Night previously, which was all Frank Sinatra. Fallen Angels, which is all but one song, was sung by Frank Sinatra. And Triplicate, which I think all of them were sung by Frank Sinatra at some point. I didn't check every single one because there's a lot of them. But you know, it, we're in that mode still with Bob Dylan. This is the last episode. We'll probably will talk about these songs and albums until we do some of our decade songs list and of course the final album rankings. But it is interesting to see all five of these now kind of in my brain, or sorry, five discs, three albums kind of all in my brain at the same time. And, it doesn't seem to be much more lore than he really wanted to do all this stuff. And he did. I mean, that's what Bob Dylan does. Some people, critics, may say it was too much. But we'll get your take and my take on the situation here today. And anything to add to this lore, the talk about Sinatra and Fallen Angels and Triplicate, and even going back to Shadows in the Night because it all kind of ties together. If you can delve into the mind of Bob Dylan at all and explain why all of this and why at this period in his life and his discography.
In hindsight, and we talked a little bit about this on the last episode, it's kind of been framed as this period existing to help him reconnect as a vocalist. You definitely we definitely heard our graveliest, most gravelly Bob, especially uh, throughout Together Through Life, Christmas in the Heart, and Tempest. Certainly, moments of great vocal performances in there, both you know, by Bob's standards and maybe by even standards. But looking back at both the albums and his live shows, it's easy to say, okay, these albums got him back to where he's been recently. We will eventually talk about both Rough and Rowdy Ways and Shadow Kingdom, of course. At the time, I don't really recall that being a major part of the conversation amongst fans, other than, he certainly started incorporating a lot of these songs into his set. Um, I mean, there were some shows I remember looking at the set list, and I don't ever remember if he went so far as to do like 50% Sinatra and 50% of his own material, but it came close. And but people were saying, like, look, I don't always love all the songs, but it's undeniable that he's singing better. And in general too, you start seeing it with the bootleg series, which we haven't talked a whole lot about over the last few episodes, but um, starting with bootleg, I want to say number 10, it started getting very completionist. I think, bootleg 8, Telltale Signs, came out as a standard 2 disc edition, and then there was the deluxe 3 disc edition. And then number 10, Another Self Portrait, there was the standard 2 disc and then the deluxe 4 disc. And then bootleg 11, the basement tapes, raw, the complete basement tapes, 6 discs, releasing not everything that was recorded during the basement tape sessions, but quite a lot of it. And this just becomes the norm. While these albums are being released, we also get Bootleg Series Volume 12, The Cutting Edge, which is literally every single take from the Bring It All Back Home, Highway 61, and Blonde on Blonde trilogy sessions. And the next one, Bootleg 13, Trouble No More, The Gospel Years, God, I feel like that was at least 7 or 8 discs. There's debate over how much control or say he has over the bootleg series, but kind of doesn't surprise me looking at all that to then see, oh, of course he released eventually a triple record and you know 3/5 albums overall. And we've already talked about Shadows in the Night. I think, Joe, did you do any research? Can you confirm if Fallen Angels is made up of material that was recorded during the same sessions?
That is what I got from my reading.
Okay,
Yes.
that's what I thought as well. So we've talked about Shadows in the Night, which you liked better than I thought you would. How do you feel about Fallen Angels, the I don't want to say the cast-offs because maybe he had it in the back of his head the whole time that this is what he was going to do, but Shadows Part 2 in some ways.
Yeah, I mean, Shadows in the Night was, like we talked about, all culled from three, I believe, three Sinatra records, which it was like his suicide trilogy. It was like all the most depressive, like dark, like head on the bar, just the lowest of the low of Frank Sinatra, whether or not that was an act of Frank Sinatra or if, that was really what was going on in his life. So the songs themselves kind of have this dark, depressive, in some ways, atmosphere to them. Fallen Angels is not that, despite the title Fallen Angels. these songs have a little bit more, I don't know, spirit to them, a little more upbeat. I think, not having a particular theme maybe helps this album a little bit. And I do think the material fits Bob's voice even a little bit better. Like Shadows in the Night, recorded with his touring band. The one addition here, which I didn't realize until I was doing a little more research, Dean Parks plays guitar on this album and Triplicate to follow. Dean Parks, legendary, played with Steely Dan a bunch, Pretzel Logic, Katie Lied, Royal Scam Asia. He played the solo on Rose Darling and Haitian Divorce, so he is a major player, just a phenomenal guitarist, joining already an unbelievable band, of course. We've talked about how good Charlie Sexton is, and Stu Kimball and Donnie Herron on steel guitar, and Tony Garnier on bass, George Selly on drums. And quick side note, I saw Elvis Costello, um, I forget exactly when, maybe right after I think we recorded the last episode, and Charlie Sexton was his guitar player. And
Ah, I didn't know he was still in the band. Yeah, how was
yeah,
that?
he was unbelievable. I mean, Elvis, his voice is becoming a little bit like Bob Dylan's, but Charlie Sexton, the tone on his guitar when they played Allison, I could have just like died right there. It sounded so unbelievably good. I already appreciated Charlie Sexton, but that brought it to just a whole new level.
Yeah, he's a
Uh,
monster.
yeah, so good. But he's being joined here by Dean Parks, who's phenomenal. The number of albums and artists that he's worked with is insane. And I didn't know that until just like a couple hours ago, so it didn't influence any of the things I'm going to talk about. But in hindsight, it makes little sense. Again, these arrangements are so tight, so atmospheric. It it plays to the original spirit of the song, but it brings it forward into modernity in such a way that I think I talked about on Chaz of the Night. It is why I really like these records. I mean, I think Bob Dylan sounds good, and I think he really inhabits the spirit of the songs, the vocals, but it's the arrangements of the guitars and everything that really just get to me, and make me just really appreciate these albums. Young at Heart, I think, is phenomenal. You get that arrangement right off the bat with the tasteful pedal steel, that just perfect guitar sound, um, the production, the mixing, performances. It just sounds like they've been playing together all their lives, and at this point, they've been playing together for a while. Almost no overdubs, nothing like that. Pretty much just, these are the arrangements. We're going to play it. We're going to get it on tape. Boom, done, next. And, they nail it. Again, like on Shaz of the Night, Bob Dylan's voice, it gets there. It doesn't get there in a straight line. There's some zigzags, some off the road kind of thing. The notes aren't quite just right where you'd want them. But I think he does a good job singing these tunes, and some of them are quite difficult to sing. Some of them I think are a little more in his wheelhouse, in his pocket. It's an odd juxtaposition with like the perfection of the instrumentals, because it just, you have this like perfectly played guitar, perfectly recorded, and then Bob's kind of warbling a little bit, and I mean, against all odds, I do think it works. I do like that kind of, here's Bob, here's this perfection, and Bob's doing his best, and it has character to it. We'll
It
say
does
that.
seem very antithetical to Joe Core,
It
though.
does, it does, but
I'm not complaining. I love it, but it's the last thing I would have expected.
I feel like you couldn't do it the other way. You can't have like perfect vocals and horrible instrumentals, but
Mhm.
if the instrumentals are just right, the vocals, I can live with it. He's Bob sounds pretty similar to Shaz in the Night, obviously, since it's basically from the same sessions. And I like the way that Bob doesn't hog the spotlight. And that's kind of always been a complaint of mine. I wish Bob would let the band breathe a little bit. Let the music do some of the work. Bob doesn't always have to do the heavy lifting. And I really appreciated on Polka Dots and Moonbeams. Bob doesn't even start singing until a minute 42 into the track. And I think that's really nice. That's really mature of Bob. Just let the band go. It's a great tune. That was Sinatra's like first solo hit.
Mm.
And it was fun kind of going back and digging up like the history of some of these songs. Some of them I knew, some of them I'd never heard before. So that's always interesting, the selection. I don't know why Bob chose these songs exactly. I don't think there's any literature explaining why he picked, each one of these individual songs, but it is very interesting. It kind of adds to the lore of the albums to even just ponder, why would Bob pick this one? Some of them make sense, like September of My Years on Triplicate. But, Young at Heart, Polka Dots and Moonbeams, not things I would associate with Bob Dylan usually. Track five, Skylark, has a nice violin or some kind of stringed instrument accompaniment. Sounds a little more folksy, and that is the only one that Sinatra didn't cover. Of all the songs that we've talked about, or didn't sing, make famous, whatever, however you want to put it,
Mm.
Skylark is the one exception, and I want to, I want to know why. Like, it seems like there has to be more to that story. I don't know if anyone knows, but Bob, if you're watching, tell me, let me know.
I imagine he heard the incredible version off of Ringo Starr's first solo album
Okay.
entitled Sentimental Journey, which we'll get to in a minute.
Hmm.
Yeah, I imagine that he, as he is wont to do, uh, he threw on a Ringo record and thought, you know what? That one right there is a good idea. And I think it's a good idea. I think Skylark is the best song on the record. Uh, I I agree with you. Donnie's violin playing on that, his violin playing on that, and track two, maybe you'll be there. Both fantastic. And yeah,
Yeah,
the electric and acoustic guitar work on Skylark too is just chef's kiss.
it adds a little, variety to the proceedings, which I don't know if we got much of on Shadows in the Night. Shadows in the Night seemed like it was very much in the same kind of Sonic universe, and this stretches it out a little bit. I think that helps. And I think overall, I mean, I like pretty much all these tunes. I think they're all good choices. Melancholy Mood's good. Come Rain or Come Shine, the closer. I think it's definitely a little front loaded, but nothing horrendous. Nothing that just takes you out of the mood here. And I like the more laid back, stripped back approach. It just feels lighter here. It's not those darker suicide album songs. There's just a little more kind of joy in the air. And I think that it works. I think the songs are a little easier to sing, maybe too, as well. I didn't notice as many of this kind of like, Bob, you shouldn't be doing that one, kind of moments. And the vocals not really stretched too thin here. I think he does a good job. It's very sentimental mood. And yeah, I mean the arrangements again, that's what I'm here for. The tasteful guitar work, the luscious pedal steel. And like I said, it has an old-fashioned atmosphere, but I think they do well to move it into, the sphere of the modern artist, modern sounding music. Turning those orchestrations and those big brass band and all the stuff that Sinatra was doing, the way that they're able to focus that into this quintet or whatever it is, sextet. I'm not sure exactly. Six people, one, two, seven people. I don't know what the word is for that. Um, it they just do a great job of transforming these tunes, making them their own. Bob making them his own, um, but also kind of paying tribute to the originals, to the Sinatra sung tunes. That it works. I think it is slightly better than Shadows in the Night. I don't know if I'm up to 4 stars, but it's like right there. And I think I would pick this one. I would definitely pick this one of the two if I had to listen to one album from the Sinatra years. I do think Fallen Angels is the superior choice.
Which, if you talk to a lot of Dylan fans, is maybe somewhat of a hot take. It's a take that I have agreed with in the past, for sure. I never really thought about it until today, but it's almost like the inverse of the Good as I've Been to You and World Gone Wrong, where um, Good as I've Been to You was kind of a bit of taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and just having fun, and it's all good. And then World Gone Wrong is a bit more of this focused, thematic, darker whole. And this is the opposite. We start out with Shadows in the Night, which is very clearly an intentional record. Fallen Angels definitely feels a bit more like, here's a bunch of songs that I like. But in the past, and still to a degree, I feel the exact same way as you in the sense that I think the band arrangements here are extremely interesting. I thought you hit on that extremely well. Like you said, Polka Dots and Moonbeams and Skylark. Also, shout outs to On a Little Street in Singapore and That Old Black Magic. Really great arrangements where, like you said, Bob really kind of gets out of the way. Melancholy Mood, same thing. Melancholy Mood is still in his set to this day. I think that Melancholy Mood has like moved its way up to like the top 40 or 50 most played songs of his entire career, which is incredible. Um, I mean, he was still playing it, I last saw him in 2022 and he was still playing it then. But yeah, I think there is a nice balance here between the upbeat numbers and the mid-tempo numbers. And I think that that balance, especially with some of those more varied band arrangements and the more upbeat numbers, I think that that allows some of the more effective ballads to shine through even brighter. Um, whereas sometimes I know for me listening to Shadows in the Night, just the sheer volume of those ballads can almost bog me down a little bit. I do think that Shadows is the superior artistic statement. And, it's difficult because I've also always said, yeah, Fallen Angels is my favorite of the two. Going back and listening to it multiple times over the last few months, I almost couldn't make up my mind because on a song by song basis, there's more individual tracks that I gravitate towards off of Fallen Angels. But, the last couple times I listened to Shadows leading up to our episode, I really found myself immersed in it. So I think I'm gonna need to pray on it a little bit when we get to our ranking. But I think you have every right to feel the way that you do. I think it's completely understandable because I might feel the exact same way. I certainly have in the past, at the very least. Again, from a conceptual level, you know, maybe it doesn't hit as hard. Maybe it's not as important to his overall output. But I do think the accessibility and the immediacy of it, it plays a role in the listenability factor, if nothing else. Um, I do think for me, the only moment on the record where I cross my fingers and hold my breath for Bob is the very end of All the Way. That's uh that's the one moment where I think he almost strays a little too far out of his comfort range. But in general, and I think he sounds impressively good on some of the more rousing numbers that you didn't hear as much on Shadow in the Night. So it's cool to hear him approaching some of these different types of songs that you didn't on the last record and hearing him still succeed at them.
And I think it makes sense, at least for me, because, some of his crooner stuff from the 2000s, it was a little more upbeat. It wasn't the
Yeah.
depressive kind of sound, um, particularly, what is it, Moonlight from
Love and Theft.
Love and Theft. Like that has this kind of buoyant spirit to it that I talked about in that episode that I really liked, and I thought he sung that in particular really well. And I kind of get some of that same spirit here on Fallen Angels.
I absolutely, yeah, I totally get that. You also, unless I'm completely misremembering, I think you've somehow found a way to conjure Billy Joel's name while talking about Moonlight, which is one of the more disappointing moments in the history of this podcast. But um, we all make mistakes from time to time, and
Listen,
that's
Billy
okay.
Joel, Frank Sinatra, Bob Dylan, they all got that connection.
The Holy Trinity,
That's right.
if you will.
Runs. The line runs straight through them. Well, I was going to ask if there was anything more to say about Fallen Angels before we jump into the triple disc that is Triplicate.
Well, I don't know if there's too much else to say about Fallen Angels. I mean, we could talk all day about the strength of these songs. I mean, again, needless to say, we're talking about songs that are written or co-written by people like Hoagie Carmichael, Jimmy Van Heusen, Harold Arlen, not Harold Arnold. That is two different characters from the hit kids television show Hey Arnold from the 90s. But Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer, I mean, all-time composers. We could sit here and wax poetic on day about the strengths of the compositions. Um, I feel uncomfortable doing that because, as I mentioned in the last episode, we're slightly out of my wheelhouse in terms of um, my depth of knowledge of this particular type. I'm a big fan of jazz in general, but I lean far more towards the instrumental jazz of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, not so much of the pop vocal jazz. Um, and also, you know, spoiler alert, it's likely that most of these particular versions are not the definitive versions of these songs. So there's not too much else to say, I think, for now. But we cannot go into Triplicate without first mentioning the other major event of 2016 in the life of Bob Dylan. At first, he releases Fallen Angels, and then later in the year, he is announced as the winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. He becomes the uh, the poet laureate uh, for 2016, and I believe he was the first singer-songwriter to ever be named to that or to win that particular prize. Uh,
Kind of funny that he was named, singer, songwriter, poet laureate in 2016, the year he released a cover album.
yeah, in the midst
Yeah,
of a
a
three
three,
album run.
where he didn't
Um,
write a single word. That's fine. That makes up for the 60s and 70s when he was really earning it.
well, I believe, and full disclosure, this is like the third or fourth time this has happened over the course of 2 years where I wrote very detailed notes for this episode that did not sync with the particular Wi-Fi network that I was on when I was writing them, and so a lot of what I'm saying is kind of off the cuff. So apologies to you, apologies to everyone listening if I sound like I'm not doing the words real good. Uh, if I remember correctly, based off of the research that I've done in the past, he they people had been advocating for him to win a Nobel Prize, I think since the late 90s. So um, this was close to 20 years in the making. The ultimately the timing is quite funny. Uh, but yeah, and you know what? I Are you going to be the one to say that he didn't deserve to win the Nobel Prize? Certainly, I am not an expert on the history of the Nobel Prize, the guidelines of it, or anything like that. Some people were certainly up in arms about it because how can you possibly, you know, mention a pop singer like Bob Dylan in the same breath as, Cormac McCarthy and so many other esteemed authors? But I don't think it's arguable that Dylan's writing has played a massive role in not just American culture since he burst onto the scene, but worldwide. He's influenced not just so many songwriters and poets, but it's not hard to find a bunch of Stephen King interviews where he talks about how Dylan influenced him and so on and so forth. So please give me your best argument for him not being deserving of it.
Listen, in 2016, I'm sure I was outraged when I heard the news. I probably have a tweet about it or something. Today, I'm fine with that. I think that if any, you know, pop musician deserved such an accolade, it would be Bob Dylan. I mean, if not just for, the lyrical content, but sort of the way he pushed forward, um, just popular music and even, the societal impacts of his early work. Times they are a changing. Like, I mean, that spurred, movements and influenced so many other people, Sam Cooke and many, many, many artists. So yeah, I couldn't give you a good reason why Bob Dylan shouldn't win it, and if there was ever a singer-songwriter that was going to win it, I don't think anyone else really would qualify and would have the breadth of material and the societal and musical impact that he had lyrically. Lyrically.
Well, since you've come so far as a Dylan fan, I'm gonna throw you a bone here, and I'm gonna give you a reason to hate on him a little. I'm gonna give you an opportunity here to dip your toe back in the water that you used to so commonly live and swim in. My one of my favorite parts of him winning the Nobel Prize is that his acceptance speech, which was widely praised, and I've read it and it is great, but there are allegations of plagiarism in his, which how incredible that in an acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize in Literature there are these potential plagiarized lines, and especially after the last few studio albums of his, where there have also been some questionable songwriting credits and whatnot. I find that to be hilarious, honestly. And it also doesn't bother me at all because to me, that just sounds like, well, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that he would do.
Yeah, I can't knock that, honestly. I feel like that was definitely a choice made by Bob Dylan, and It was not an accident. Like that, I guaranteed. And that, that is why I've grown to appreciate Bob Dylan. It's little things like that, plagiarizing your own Nobel Prize acceptance speech for, songwriting. I'm just
Ah,
gonna steal some stuff. I'm Bob Dylan. What are you gonna do?
God bless him. All right, Joe. So the year is 2015. You, a big Bob Dylan fan, received the new album Shadows in the Night. And oh my God, wow, Bob just keeps finding new ways to surprise us and to mess with us, to throw curveballs at us. Here he is doing the Sinatra cover record, and you know what? It's actually kind of cool and different, and there's like real artistic, effort put into this. That's awesome. Man, I wonder what he'll do next though. Like it's gonna be great. I can't wait to hear my favorite songwriter, Bob Dylan, start, writing his own songs again now that he did this. And then the next year, again, 1 year later, it's like, hell, when was the last time that Bob released two albums in back year? It's been a while. But wow, okay. Another Sinatra record. All right. Well, that's fine. I ended up playing the last one a couple of times. I'll listen to this one once, but okay. We've we've gone back to the well enough times here. I mean, two albums. I mean, but okay, he did two folk albums in the early 90s, and Self-Portrait was the double record. So what's the next album that we're gonna get from sure he's got to return to writing his own stuff, or maybe another acoustic thing, or what's the next thing that we get?
Well, Dylan, it's another Sinatra covers album.
Oh,
But
that's
this,
crazy. So it's a third one. Interesting. So I imagine the same thing, whatever, 12 songs from that era. Um,
Mm-mm.
oh, well, the Christmas album was like 15 songs. So yeah. Oh boy. How many songs are we talking, Joe?
Well, Dylan, it's a triple album, and it consists of 30 separate songs from God, I don't even know. There's 30 songs on this album. It's called Triplicate, if there was any indication. It could be a big one. Now, technically, it could have fit
Very
on two
subtle.
discs. Yeah.
Yeah.
It could have fit on two discs,
Mhm.
but Bob Dylan was worried about, I believe, vinyl not supporting it, so we had to go three. 30 songs. I don't believe there's any rhyme or reason to the picks or anything. He labeled each disc with its own name. There's Till the Sun Goes Down, that's disc one. Devil Dolls, disc two. And Coming Home Late, that's disc three.
Yeah, I believe that was his homage to the 2012 trilogy of albums by Green Day entitled Uno, Dos, and Tre, which were meant to signify getting ready for the party, being at the party, and then after the party. Um,
That makes a
so
lot of sense. That
yeah,
actually shines a lot of light on this album in general.
yes.
It is not a song for song recreation of Frank Sinatra's own triple album, which I believe we jokingly said didn't exist. That was wrong because his trilogy, Past, Present, Future from 1980, was a triple album. So, Bob's just following in the footsteps of past glories here.
Oh boy. I mean, what a fucking genius move. I'm not only going to release a third one, I'm going to make it a goddamn triple out for everyone complaining that I'm doing something different. Here you can you imagine if after Slow Train Coming and Saved and everybody complaining that he was religious now, if Shot of Love was a triple album? Oh my God.
I would have just melted some brains. You know, this album, I don't. really think I'll just cut to the chase. I really don't think it has a right to exist as like as a full-on Bob Dylan release. Like this should have been like a bootleg series, like not part of his main, discography, a little offshoot. The fact that he would do this is just so bizarre, and it's not culled from the same sessions either. Like it's a totally new thing. Like he didn't get enough from, Fallen Angels and Shadows in the Night. He said, I'm getting back, I'm getting the boys back together, calling up Dean, calling up Charlie. Listen, guys, I got a hot new idea for this new record. We're gonna do 30 Frank Sinatra songs, and they did it, and it exists, and it's similar to the other stuff. Really, the only difference as far as the preparation and the um, creation of these is no Stu Kimball. I guess he got tired of Sinatra. It's like, nah, I don't think I'm gonna sit this one out, Bob. But it's Charlie Sexton, Dean Parks, Donnie Herron, Tony Garnier, George Roselli. They're back. They're back with Bob.
And we got a horn section augmenting a few, and there are spare horns on the other two records, but here they come right in on track one, and they pop up multiple times.
And they're not a welcome sound as far as I thought they would be. But and then they sound fine. Like nothing against the horn section and the
Sure.
arrangement. I just don't jibe with what Bob Dylan is doing with these horns. Like the whole spirit of the thing just kind of goes over the edge. Like I like the little bit of lightness on Fallen Angels. Like it wasn't so oppressively heavy, but these kind of swinging, sexy tunes, just I just don't think Bob approaches them vocally as well as he did the other Sinatra tunes. And there's plenty of good songs, I think, on Triplicate, but the horn songs kind of just didn't work with his more limited vocal range, especially in comparison, with a Frank Sinatra, with, some of the crooners, the Tony Bennett's, the Sammy Davis Jr., of the past. It just kind of turned me off when, when the horns come in right off the bat on, I guess I'll have to change my plans.
I understand what you're saying. I think I disagree because I what I like about Shadows in the Night and Fallen Angels to a degree is that even though there's horns again on a couple of songs, they're so unnoticeable in the grand scheme of things that they might as well not be there. I think the cool aspect about those records is that, like, hey, look, we're taking these songs that historically have been so heavily orchestrated with either strings, horns, or both, and we're showing you how beautiful and interesting they can sound with this stripped down combo, pedal steel driven, so on and so forth. But I end up, and so all that to say, I can understand maybe feeling like the horns are an unwelcome presence here. But because we're looking at 30 songs here,
That is a good point. That's a good point.
and in some ways, and I don't mean this at all as a slight towards the compositions and certainly not the composers, but it's essentially like there's the slow one and there's the slightly faster one. There's two songs on the record, and there's certainly a lot more of, I think, probably two-thirds of the record are the slow one. And so whenever an actual upbeat song happens, it's a very nice change of pace. And for something to be happening that's sonically different with the horns, that personally works for me. And some of those songs, like I think Braggin is a great performance. That's one of my favorites on the record. I really like The Best Is Yet to Come, which I've always liked that song a lot anyway. I understand what you're saying. I don't think you're wrong for feeling that way. And honestly, this is one of those opinions. Like, I can only be honest about how I feel, but it's also one of those opinions of mine that even as I say it out loud, I feel stupid. Like, oh, there's too much slow stuff. I need the faster stuff. And, like, cause like that doesn't matter if the composite, but like ultimately, this album is, if I pull it up here, almost 96 minutes long. So if you're gonna sit and listen to this in one listen, I mean that's a long time to be listening to anything. And as I've said a billion times, I value diversity. It's not so much about like I need more faster songs. I like fast songs better than slow songs. It's more so I need to be taken on a diverse sonic journey. Um, and when again, so much of it is a very slow record, and the slower ones tend to, have or feature some more of those angular, jazzy contours, where the melody lines are outlining, these more intricate chord progressions and extensions, larger interval leaps and whatnot. And the phrases are kind of floating around the harmony and whatnot. And these complex harmonic progressions, Bob is good at handling to an extent and for a certain amount of time. It gets to a point where, I don't have anything against songs like, There's a Flaw in My Flu or But Beautiful or anything like that. But I reach a point on the record where I'm just like, I get it. I I really do. And it sucks because I think there are quite a few individual highlight. If you listen to most of these songs just individually on their own, out of context, there's only so much to say. There's very few, I think, outright bad performances. I do think maybe the worst vocal performance across these 3/5 albums, depending how you look at it, is This Nearly Was Mine. Bob really, really struggles on that one in particular. But in general, again, we were talking on the Discord the other day. And when I say the Discord, I mean the Taste Like Music Discord, which, if you're not already donating to the Taste Like Music Patreon to get exclusive content, um, what are you waiting for? Go and do that. Get exclusive content and come hang out with us all day, every day. I've got my own server that's sort of like an offshoot of it. And we talk about Bob and the Beatles and other stuff all day. So much fun. And I believe that's only $1 a month. Is that right, Joe?
One as low as $1 a month.
Come on now. We were talking specifically, it was technically on my server, but my server is, I don't know, part of like the TLM Discord universe, if you the
The expanded
multiverse.
universe. It's
Yeah.
part of the expanded universe.
And recently started doing this project. I figured it out that between all of Bob's studio albums, live albums, archival releases, obviously including bootleg series and whatnot, and then original songs, cover songs, traditional songs, across all of his officially released records. He's technically put out, I think, somewhere between 850 and 900 individual songs. And so I decided we're going to do one a day just to talk about. And we were talking the other day about the album closer, Why Was I Born? And I was listening to a lot of the other versions that have been released of that song, including Frank Sinatra, including Billie Holiday. And genuinely, I was like, I prefer Bob's version to almost all of these, mostly looking at it from a I don't know, an arrangement standpoint. And I was saying that, and of course, as I was saying that, our friend Alex immediately hit me with the Ella Fitzgerald version. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, that's the best one. But not that, not trying to say that Bob is no Ella Fitzgerald or anything. But again, you take these songs individually and uh, you recognize how really solid they are. You listen to songs like Stardust and As Time Goes By, Once Upon a Time. I really like Trade Winds a lot. I have an attachment to Sentimental Journey because of the Ringo album. I think Bob does a great job with it. So many of these songs are great, but as a listening experience, I think the whole thing is a little difficult uh, in one sitting, and
Wow.
I'm not really sure how highly I value it as an artistic statement overall. But what do you think?
Well, you pretty much nailed it, I think. I think overall, it's a pretty lousy listen. And I struggle with this with more than one Bob Dylan record where I say, well, this record could have been a lot better if Bob had just done a couple things to, either streamline it or include the best songs or just put a little bit maybe more work after the fact into it. For everything he does with the arrangements and getting things together, it's like once it's done, it's like, see ya, done. Someone else can take care of it. I'm out of here. I'm on to my next thing. I mean, this album, I think there's some great songs on it. And one you didn't mention, but I think is an absolute knockout is September of My Years. The
Hmm.
second track on the album. I get to this and I'm like, well, okay, maybe we have something here. Because I think it's an absolute knockout and I think I don't want to say it's as good as the Sinatra version, but it's right there. I think just the arrangement overall and the way he sings it, just the mood of everything, and the way the lyrics really just kind of relate to Bob at this period of his life. I think it even works with those kind of ruined vocals that he has, kind of brings out the emotion in the tune even more. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's real high on my list of, favorite post, whatever our next songs,
90,
series is,
90s to present,
90s to
yeah.
present, as far as one of his cover tunes, it's definitely up there, near the top for me. And I think if this was a single disc, 10 to 12 songs, you could absolutely pick out some really good tunes to make a really strong record that, lived up to Fallen Angels and maybe even surpassed it. And in theory, everything you were saying about the horns makes sense. Like, theoretically, that is exactly what this album needs. In practice, I just don't like the approach and how it sounds with Bob. It doesn't do it for me. I would much more like appreciate, you know, the 10 to 12 kind of songs that are similar to Fallen Angels and Shadows in the Night. That more melancholy mood, the more sentimental mood, not so much the swinging, jiving, bebopping kind of Bob Dylan mood.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think it kind of overstretches its bounds. And sometimes Here's That Rainy Day, I think, is a beautiful vocal performance by Bob. But I think Stormy Weather is an absolute train wreck. Like those big vocal jumps, the intervals just doesn't work.
Stormy weather. Yeah.
It, yeah, exactly. It's just there's something missing there. Maybe, something like what was the one track that you really hate? I think it was maybe it was on the last album
Oh,
where
this nearly was
this
mine.
Neil's mind, the Rogers and Hammerstein, like that. I don't know if Bob really should be taking on that canon right now in his advanced age. But I do think the Van Heusen numbers, the Hoagie Carmichael numbers, I think that's the stuff that he really kind of nails. That the arrangements, the vocal performances, those just seem to work so much better for me than something like Braggin',
Mm.
or I guess I'll have to change my plans.
I mean, I disagree, but I also don't care. So, it's like
Why
I
are we
can't.
even still talking
Yeah.
about that?
Well, it's interesting because I know quite a few people who would say that this is their favorite of the Sinatra trilogy. I know uh, Cram thought so, and Cram had it ranked markedly higher than the other two when he did his Dylan ranking 5 years ago. I know some people who put this in their top 15, 20 Dylan records. You know, I think for me, it's just like, look, I can't tell those people that they're wrong. Obviously, um, subjective listening experience is a subjective listening experience. But again, like in terms of it making an artistic statement, I feel like we've mentioned a few times uh, between the three records. I think it's really stunning sometimes to hear through Bob's voice, this elder ragged voice singing these songs of heartbreak, lost love, missed opportunities, the human condition, the internal darkness, depression, all those things. Like in a way, it highlights the um the struggle that is life, the lifelong struggle, because life is this crazy journey filled with intense highs and intense lows, and sometimes it's strangely cathartic, I think, to hear someone in their older years be able to express this pain, because it's like, man, they've been through it, and maybe they're even going through it right now. Maybe they're going through it again, but they're still here. They persevered. There's something to be said for that. And I totally respect that, and I totally agree with it to a degree. I don't, and again, maybe it is just my failure to connect with this genre, or this general world as much as I do with other types of music, but I don't see how Triplicate is this successful artistic achievement when the only thing that can be said about it is that there's more of it than there are on the other record. Like, the things that I like about Shadows in the Night and Fallen Angels are both present here. And if it was shorter, it could, perhaps better than both of those records, strike the balance between whatever tempos, arrangements, so on and so forth. But to me, it just ends up feeling like a more is more thing. And I just don't see how that necessarily lends to it being this great statement, or at least a different statement than the one that's already been made.
No, I agree. I don't think it really. I feel like it's a lot of projection by critics saying that this is like the best one, and I mean I believe it had the highest meta score. If you like to subscribe to that, the critics were very very positive towards this one, and I'm with you. I don't really get it as a listening experience, artistic statement. I, it just seems like, you know, more of the stuff we already heard with a couple little wrinkles in there, but I just don't see the need for it after those other two discs, and to make this one three discs, it just doesn't. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like a Bob Dylan move just to piss people off, but it also isn't like at a base level that kind of album. It's not like a, face. What the hell is it called? um, what was his 1970s album that everyone hates?
Self-portrait.
Yeah, it's not
The
like a
face.
self-portrait. I could, for whatever reason, I see a face and I think Phil Collins. I think face
Yes,
value.
naturally.
But it doesn't seem like it's that the like winking kind of like here's a bunch of Sinatra tunes with some added wrinkle that makes them kind of weird, and this is my artistic statement about that. Like it just seems like here's a bunch more of the stuff I'm already doing. Here, just listen to it. Just listen to it and love it because I'm Bob Dylan. Like it needs something else. It needs some sort of wink or some sort of um, you know, statement or subversive, just something to make it worthwhile to me. And it just doesn't seem like that. And maybe it was, it would be easier to swallow if it was, a year apart of each one. And okay, you have some time to kind of get your bearings about you. And it always seems worse when you're listening to these albums through any discography kind of back to back to back because it grates on you, especially when it's something like this where it's five friggin' discs of Frank Sinatra. Like that's a lot to handle. I don't think it's a failure or anything. I just don't really see the need to release Triplicate in
No,
2017.
I
Make it a bootleg series in 2019 or something, and sure. But to yeah, to include this so soon after the other two without really having a reason for it, I don't see it.
if we're collecting all-time quotes throughout the course of this series, I would like to nominate I don't believe this album has a right to exist. Um, but it is funny, yeah, because it's like, well, yeah, I guess from a musical standpoint, like, am I gonna call it a failure when like probably again, if out of context you played me 26 to 28 of these 30 songs, I'd be like, yeah, it sounds good. At the very least, a few of which I'd be, wow, that's really great. Again, there's very little on here that on its own I truly dislike. Um, but I know you're very sorry. My cat is very upset that we've been talking about these records for so long. Um, but yeah, it's just I don't know. I rarely fall into the camp of, this album should have been a single record. But I don't know. Yeah, we're calling a spade a spade, a triple album of Bob Dylan singing the Great American Songbook, following two records of similar material is not exactly comparable to the White Album or Exile on Main Street, as far as I'm concerned. So,
Yeah, I'm with you there. Rare agreement
yeah.
on our parts. That's good. It's good to know that that is possible.
Yes. And I'm gonna be interested to see if it's possible with our next record, which we got two more albums, Joe. And this next one is the last so far, the last big one. And that is, of course, 2020's Rough and Rowdy.
Waff and Wowdy ways.
Wuff and Rowdy Ways by Bob Dylan is very good. God damn it. Have you have you heard this album in its entirety before?
I have.
And you heard it in the midst of your deep uh Dylan hater phase, is that right?
Um, yeah, I mean this this was before my coming to the light. This was right when we started the channel, actually.
Yeah.
Tastes Like Music in its infancy. 2020 was our first year. The first year I really started listening to new music again, since it kind of trailed off 2017. I kind of got sick of everything, so I stopped listening. And this channel brought me back.
Yeah.
So it was one of, 150 albums I listened to in 2020, and it is closer to the bottom than the top. But again, it was a different time in my life then. I was not, in the same place I am now with Bob Dylan. So it'll be very interesting to go back to it because I have not heard it since I listened to it as a new release, and immediately was like, you know what, I'm not doing the Bob Dylan ranking discography. I don't need to do that. I don't
Yeah.
need that in my life right now. We have COVID
And look at you now.
everywhere. I don't need this darkness. So that this is actually one of the ones I'm really looking forward to because I want to know if, my listening to the entire Bob Dylan discography up to now will change my feelings on it, if I've grown, or if it's just one that's always going to fall flat for me.
Well,
We'll see.
well,
It's gonna
this is typically the time of the show where I tell you what I want you to consider and keep in mind listening to the next record. And it would be unfair of me to say, I want you to keep in mind everything because we've been doing this show for over 2 years now, and there are records and songs that you have not listened to in quite a long time. But I truly believe that in a lot of ways, Rough and Rowdy Ways, the enjoyment of it is greatly impacted by understanding this guy's life and career up until this point. And if I want to sort of hone that in a little bit for you, I do think it's relatively soon enough that we've listened to a lot of these newer records where he has ruminated a lot more on life and impending mortality, all in the midst of the sort of greater sphere of Western music, of blues, jazz, swing, and obviously country and folk. And then with the Sinatra records, getting back in touch with what he's capable of melodically and vocally. So I'll ask you to keep in mind where you've just experienced him as a vocalist as well as where he's been at as a lyricist and as a thinker in some ways for the last 20 or so years leading up to this. And I am going to be fascinated to see how
I'm
he
gonna have
pans
to
out.
pull a Dewey Cox and think about my entire life before I
Yes.
listen to this record. My entire life with Bob
Mm-hmm.
Dylan. I'm gonna think about it. I'm gonna put on the record. And I have no idea what I'm gonna think. Like honestly, this is the one that I have just like the least amount of confidence in my previous score, and just I'm just gonna kind of wash that out of my existence, and we're just gonna go in fresh with new Bob Dylan loving ears, and we'll see how I feel about Rough and Rowdy Ways. I think we all deserve it, as me and you, the fans, the listener, just everybody. We need to cleanse our palate of all this Frank Sinatra stuff. Go back to the original Bob Dylan, and that'll be the next show. That's it for it. We're running out of time. It's been 5 years, and I still haven't upgraded my Zoom, so we have limited amount of time. Hopefully, I can remember how to end this thing. That's it for Fallen Angels, Triplicate. That's it for Frank Sinatra. How do you feel about Fallen Angels? How do you feel about Triplicate? How do you feel about Shadows of the Night? Just throw it all in the comments section. Let us know which of the Sinatra covers albums you prefer. And if you're with us on our kind of dismissal of Triplicate, or if there's something that we're missing, just leave it all in the comments. We read them, we love them. And of course, check the description for all the social medias, the Facebooks, the X's, the Instagrams, a link to our Patreon, which you can sign up for and then join us in the Discord for as low as $1 per month. So check us out there. And then, enjoy yourself, treat yourself with Rough and Rowdy Ways. We will be discussing that next time here on the Discovering Bob Dylan podcast. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Rest in peace, Todd Snyder.